Are you overwhelmed by the challenge of personalizing communication for thousands of students? That's where Element 451's AI assistants come in. From nudging prospective students to guiding those already on their journey, AI assistants don't just automate, they write, build, and optimize every step of your digital campaigns. Discover how at element451.com/AI team.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to What We're Learning About Leadership and Ourselves, a pulse check mini-series where we explore the lessons, challenges, and surprises of leadership in higher ed as young professionals.
We're your hosts, Shelby Moquin and Aaron Fields, the marketing and content experts behind Enrollify. We're exploring what it really takes to grow as leaders while navigating the twists and turns of our careers.
And whether you're a seasoned leader, just starting out, or even somewhere in between, join us for honest conversations, personal insights, and even a little bit of humor along the way. And together we'll explore how to embrace feedback, even the tough kind, lead without a title, and build the confidence to own your wins.
Because leadership isn't just about leading others, it's also about learning who you are.
So we're here on our very first Pulse Check series, and people might not know. Well, now they know because of the intro, but usually you don't see our faces or hear our voices here around Enrollify. We do some of the back-end marketing work, and so it's a very exciting time for Shelby and I to come onto the mic and share some of our thoughts as young professionals and how we grow as leaders and how we handle different things when it comes to leadership and growing as young professionals. So, Shelby, to kick us off, we'll start with a little bit of a fun question here. What do you think is the most hilariously unhelpful piece of advice or feedback that you've ever gotten? You know, those moments where you're just kind of like, thanks, I guess.
Okay, so for me, for those that don't know, I was a competitive dancer growing up, and obviously before you perform, you have nerves, same with any public speaking thing. And I had an instructor one time, I told my instructor, I was like, I'm really nervous, I'm kind of scared. And she literally just goes, don't be. And I was like, I mean, I've tried that already, but thanks for the advice. I wish you could have given me a little bit of a pep talk, some good words of encouragement. But my thing with that is just any advice that's just breathe, or you're kind of doing that already, so it's not very applicable to what you're doing or what you're going to do.
Yeah, it's not very actionable advice. I used to get that same advice for band concerts. I would be really nervous for band concerts in high school and college, and someone would say the same thing, and it's just like, okay, let me just turn that off. I have always been notoriously a bad parallel parker. Anyone who knows this knows that about me. When I was in college, someone once told me I would be better at parallel parking if I just believed in myself.
Parallel parking is hard.
Yes, as if having a magical spark of confidence, which we will talk about those later on in this series, but fitting a shoebox in car into a small little space. You will not find me parallel parking when there's nobody on the street, and you will not find me parallel parking when there's hundreds of people on the street. It's just, I will find somewhere else to park. It's not my thing.
No, you'll do the 2-block walk instead of parking right in front of where you're supposed 100%. To be. 100%. Our topic for this first episode is talking about feedback and why feedback feels so tough as young professionals. So, Erin, I have a question for you, and that is, why does feedback often feel so personal, even when it's intended to help you?
You know, this is a really good question, and I think it's interesting to think on this when I was first starting in my career. I think sometimes feedback doesn't just feel like a critique of your work, especially when you're just starting out, or even if you're a mid-level professional. It kind of feels like a critique of you, and that's why it really hits so hard. You know, as a young professional, you're still figuring out your voice, you're still figuring out your style, and you're still figuring out your value in the professional world. So then when someone comes to you and says, well, you know, maybe this isn't quite right, it's kind of tough to not hear you're not quite right. And so for me, it's this constant inner dialogue of saying, you know, am I good enough at this? Do they think I can handle this role? Does this feedback mean I'm failing? And let's be real, those times when you're working and you've skipped your lunch break, or you've stayed late, or you've poured every single kind of ounce of energy or creative into something, hearing that something isn't perfect sort of feels like a gut punch sometimes. And what makes that even tougher, I think, is that you're always trying to prove yourself as a young professional, right? You want to prove and show that you're capable, that you've got good instincts, that you're worth really investing in. So when that feedback kind of feels critical, it's easy to spiral down and think, well, great, now they don't know what I'm doing. My boss can't trust me, even though you know internally that's not true. It's hard not to go there in your head. And for me, this has really been a learning process, and emphasis on the learning, because trust me, I don't have it anywhere near figured out. This is still something that I immensely struggle with. What's helped me is trying to separate that myself from my work. And feedback isn't talking about who I am as a person or my capabilities of doing something. You have to think of it as the work that you're doing and how we can make it better. And that's that mental shift that I'm really trying to work on. And at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, we're human. It's still going to feel personal sometimes. It's just going to hit like that. I think that's part of being ambitious and kind of caring deeply about what you're doing. But the more that I practice separating feedback from my self-worth, I think the less heavy it feels, and the more that I can actually use it to get better. And that's the goal, right? To grow and not just stew over it.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's very much like it is all about your mindset, because a lot of things get taken as either so positive or so negative. And so when you get a piece of feedback, our human defense is like we want to be defensive, right? Like we want to protect what we did. And so like the truth is like the growth starts with you. And when you can alter that mindset to really allow yourself to be open to feedback, I think you open yourself to like all of these like avenues for growth and opportunity. And like you have to get past the mindset of your boss is not there to attack you. Like no one is really here to attack you. We want to all like everyone wants to help each other. And so you have to adopt the belief that like your coworkers and superiors like genuinely want you to succeed. And like when you view feedback as an attack, you're only setting yourself up for failure. And this has taken me something like again, like you said, I've been working on this for years. I'm very like generally a defensive person when someone is trying to critique my work. It happens with dance, it happens with marketing. And so I feel like it's a huge learning curve, especially coming right out of college, where like I expect my professors to like give me constructive feedback, like that is their job. But like with my coworkers and like colleagues and my bosses, like I want to impress them. So it is kind of a little bit jarring when I want like, or I'm like building myself up where I'm really hoping I get something good and it doesn't come back that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, for sure for me is like the mindset is like that is my biggest thing, is like I can feel myself getting defensive sometimes when I get something like a blog post back or social copy, and I'm like, no, hold on. They're here to help me. They want to help me grow. It's not what I did wrong. They're just opening all of these opportunities and doors for me to help get better.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a really good point about being open to feedback, because I mean, it's like anything. If you don't have that mindset where you're not even at a point where, think about being open minded about something. If someone's coming to you in some kind of debate and you're on the defensive side already before that conversation's even happened, you're going to take that differently and take that conversation differently than if you came into that conversation open minded in the first place. So it's the same thing with feedback. If you're going in and you have this mindset of like, this is like the best thing I've ever done, it's not going to need any changes, like this is perfect, this is Picasso from the beginning, compared to if you're like, okay, here's, maybe my mentor, I'm passing this off, I trust them, they're going to give me feedback on this. You have that open mind, you're going to grow so much more than starting out on the defensive side when you're getting that feedback. And
Correct.
so I guess that leads me to this follow-up question. Do we think that there's a difference between feedback that's tough because it's true versus feedback that's tough because it's poorly delivered? And for me, I think like 110% there's a difference, because I think just like people take the time to work through how to receive feedback, that people should also take the time to learn how to give feedback. And you could have the best feedback in the entire world, but if it's not delivered correctly, then the message fails and it falls flat and the point is lost. And people receive feedback in different ways. And so, especially if you are managing a team under you, it's really important, in my opinion, to learn and be aware of how those people best receive feedback or recognition so you can best work together as a team.
Yes, my favorite tactic for this is the compliment sandwich. Mallory,
yes.
shout out to
Classic.
Mallory. She does such a great job at this, because sometimes I will submit something and then I'll get it back and I reread like the prompt and I was like, okay, this wasn't, I see where she's coming from. Like I completely missed the point, but she delivers it so gently. It's so comforting and nice that it's like, I see what you're going for here, but XYZ. And then she wraps it up with a nice little note. Like it makes you feel good, even though you're getting a decent critique and a piece of feedback.
Yeah, I mean, if you just hammer someone on the bad and you don't pick out any good feedback for someone to build upon, your employees' morale is just going to tank. And that is so bad, especially I think in higher ed, when enrollment numbers, higher ed is at a crossroads. When enrollment numbers are down, pressure is rising. I think the more that you can give your team and in telling them what they're doing right while you're giving them that constructive feedback, I think is all the more important. And I think it's something that is vastly overlooked in higher ed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Erin, I've got another question for you.
Sure.
So, we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier with the positive and negative mindset with feedback. What if we stopped labeling feedback as positive or negative and we saw it as an opportunity for growth? How would that shift our mindsets?
I really love the concept of this idea, because the moment that we label feedback as either positive or negative, we're really setting ourselves to react emotionally. It's kind of what I was talking about a little bit earlier about opening yourself up to feedback instead of immediately being defensive. It's like before we've even processed what's being said, we're already putting it in a good or a bad box, and that changes how we hear it. But if you strip that all away, feedback at its core is really just data. It's information that you can use for yourself to get better. And here's the thing, when we label feedback, we make it harder to focus on what is actually the actionable part of that feedback. It becomes more of how it made us feel rather than really what we can do with it. But if we stop obsessing over whether feedback is coined as positive or negative and just kind of see it as neutral, as true input, it totally shifts the dynamic. Feedback stops feeling more like judgment and it starts feeling more like collaboration. It's less become about defending yourself and more about working together to make the work better. And honestly, isn't that really what feedback should be? A conversation and not a performance review. I mean, who wants that every single time you're sending off a piece of content? Let's build each other up. But I really think that if we all approached feedback this way, it would take the pressure off of us all. Instead of thinking, getting feedback and saying, am I good or am I bad at this? We would be asking questions more like, okay, well, what's the next step to make this piece of content even better? It's really quite a subtle shift in the grand scheme of things, but it really changes everything down the line. It takes feedback out of this emotional high stakes zone and really turns it into something more actionable and productive. And the best part is that kind of mindset doesn't just make us better at what we do, it makes us more adaptable and resilient as the leaders that we are building for tomorrow. Because when you stop seeing feedback as something like this makes me good or this makes me bad, you open yourself up to so much more growth. And honestly, isn't that what we're all here for?
Yeah, I love the point about like we need to get rid of the labels. Like I'm so tired of labels. And when we get rid of those, it becomes less about like what we did right or wrong, and then we can truly look at all the opportunities that we have right in front of us. And it's about how we can focus on how we can use that input to like, get those gains, to level up, to increase your productivity, to build on these skill sets, rather than, kind of getting stuck down in the dumps, like whether like getting that feedback feels bad and icky. And I liked your point on collaboration because I love feedback that opens up all these like different little loopholes, because I think feedback is just a great way to have sounding boards with each other. Like I feel like when we're going back and forth on like campaigns or social media content, and you'll be like, "Ooh, what about this?" And I'll be like, "Oh, what about this?" And then you're like, "Oh, like I like that, but like what about this?" And then we kind of just merge all of these like ideas and feedback together to create this like amazing end product. But I love collaboration with feedback. That is very good point. And I think it's something that a lot of people are missing because, again, we get so defensive or we either label it as positive or negative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, with continuing on the conversation of feeling defensive with feedback sometimes, because we've all been there in our career, like I don't believe there's a single
Absolutely.
person that can say that they have got feedback and haven't felt defensive. What's a moment in your career where you feel like you got feedback and it felt completely off base at first, but then it later turned out to be exactly what you needed to hear?
So for me, I think back to when I started getting tasked all of these blog posts for Enrollify, and I hadn't done a lot of blog posts before. I was really unsure of what it was or what I was doing, and I sent you and Mallory the first one, and I looked at like it came back to me, and it was like covered in comments, and I was like, oh my god, I didn't know what I was doing. I felt so defeated, but also like defeated in a good way because I knew I tried, but I also knew that like you were giving me all of this beneficial material that I could take and apply to all of these future blog posts that I would be doing. And so I think when I started that project a couple of months ago, I was so hesitant and I was so scared. But now looking back, that feedback that you guys gave me allows me to do these blog posts like 10 times more efficiently, and I feel like they don't need as much like editing or like little quick fixes as they used to because I took your feedback. And here's the thing here is there's a big difference between just reading the feedback and like actually understanding it, right? Like I had to read it and I had to like pause for a moment and be like, okay, what are they saying here and how can I apply this to what I am doing in the future? Like it's more than just clicking, like the checkbox on the suggestion. Like you can't just do that. If you want to truly better yourself, you need to understand it and where it's coming from and how it can apply to the situation that you're doing. So for me, it was a little jarring when you guys gave me all of that feedback, but in a good way because I feel so much more confident about like my copywriting now and my blog posts. Like I feel like I can handle them easier, and yeah, big adjustment, but an adjustment for the good.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think about back to when I started in June and you had been here for like a month or, so before me, and I even think about like from that time when I started and knowing you and your experience to how much you've grown now and how much you've developed not only as a copywriter, but like in so many different areas as well. I mean, like my bread and butter is social media, and I've been helping you with social media stuff, and like you're out there doing some social media copywriting all by yourself, and like we've gotten to this point where, a lot of times I trust you to put something out there. Like there are sometimes you don't even have to run things by me. And going back to your point about blog posts, like I don't really need to give you feedback on the structure of blog posts anymore because you've got SEO stuff down. And like you said, a lot of times now it's just more like nitpicky stuff. And so just to see you evolve and elevate and really grow over the last like 7 or 8 months that I've been here at Enrollify has been absolutely a joy and honor to see. I think for me, something that felt off base at first, and Mallory's going to listen to this and
Oh,
laugh,
yay.
but later turned out to be what I needed is delegating. And delegating is such a loaded word, right? For the longest time, I really thought that being hands-on was my thing. Like I was the person who could juggle all the balls, check all the boxes, make sure every little detail was exactly right. And so when, Mallory came to me and she was like, you need to delegate a little bit more, I don't think it exactly landed the way that she probably hoped. Not that like I wasn't offensive or anything. That's not what I mean. But like as an achiever, as like an Enneagram 3, you're like, okay, it makes me second guess myself. Like, am I being told to delegate because, someone else can do it better than me? Am I not like performing the way I need to perform? And so that thought kind of stuck with me for a while. Every time I kind of tried to hand something off at first, I think like, okay, well, someone else going to do it, the way it needs to be done, or it's going to meet like standards that I have for myself. And spoiler alert, really, that's a fast track to burnout. Like, if you're listening to this and that's you, like, get out. Get out as soon as you can of that. Start delegating, learn how to do it. Over time, I kind of started to realize that by holding on so tightly to all these projects, I wasn't just overwhelming myself, I was really holding our team back. And I wasn't giving you all the space to step in and own your strengths and really grow, which now looking back, I am so glad that I have learned that skill, because like we were talking about, Shelby, that has given you a spotlight to shine and grow in so many areas that you're just excelling at right now. And I mean, letting go isn't easy. I would say that nobody really likes to let go of a lot of things. And honestly, it's, we still all struggle with that sometimes, but it's been one of the best lessons I have learned in my career. And I feel like it's something that people don't learn a lot this early in their career like I have. Delegation isn't about saying, I can't do this. It's about saying, like, I trust someone else to do this. In return, it frees you up to focus on bigger picture things that actually moves the needle. And so when I first joined Enrollify's first lessons in leadership cohort, the timing of that really couldn't have been better for me, because Carrie Phillips, who was our instructor, talked a lot about what we call servant leadership, how empowering your team really ultimately makes you a better leader in return. And something really clicked in my brain after that lesson. What surprised me the most about that is also how I learned from other participants in that course. Hearing their stories and their leadership styles made me realize that delegation really isn't just a skill, but it's a mental shift. Now, I try to remind myself this daily. Delegating isn't about giving up control. It's about creating opportunities, for your team to step up and focus on what matters. It's one of those lessons that's become a part of who I am as a leader, and it's truly made all of the difference.
Yeah, I love your point on, honestly, like, you kind of touched on it a little bit. Like, leaders, like, we know, like, we need to know when to delegate, and like also we need to know when to ask for help, because like sometimes we do have so much on our plate that, like, I don't mind like when you give me those little things. Like, I love it. It also makes me feel like you can trust me and I feel special, but then also I feel a little bit of like gratification knowing like, okay, I'm helping her. Like, I know like she has a lot on her plate, and I love helping people. And like, as leaders, I feel like we need to acknowledge a little bit more of like, it's okay to ask for help. Like, if you feel like you're swamped, Erin, please know you can always come to me. I'm sure you do know this, but like, I feel like it's something we need to recognize a little bit more, because as young professionals, we want to prove ourselves so much. Like, I hate saying, but like, you never want to say no, but like sometimes it's okay to say no, because you do have a lot going on, and then you get swamped by always saying yes, and then you're kind of stuck in this hole, and you're like, hold on a minute, okay, actually, I do need some help. Can you help me out here? And I think it's just very important for us to recognize, so we don't burn out, and two, we can give the spotlight to other team members for people to shine. And yeah, great points.
Yeah,
Great points.
prioritization and delegation really go hand in hand, because if you can't prioritize what's on your plate, then you can't delegate what needs to be delegated. How do you maintain your confidence when tough feedback challenges your abilities?
It's it's so hard. Again, this goes back to kind of looking at everything as an opportunity, because if you are sending off all of this content and you're getting it all back at once, it can kind of put you down in the dumps, because like you're getting all of these like things that kind of make you feel icky inside. And it's just very much like, okay, again, mindset, step away, remind yourself that you're human. One, we all make mistakes, and like, it is okay to get feedback. Everybody gets feedback. I get feedback, you get feedback, CEOs get feedback, like we all do. And so it's not something that is like a unique experience to you. Yes, it does, it's coming at you, but like everybody goes through this, and it is a process. I feel like for me, to maintain my confidence, I just have to remind myself that it is a process. And like, I am still growing, I am evolving, and it's okay to have those dips up and down of confidence. But at the end, you always want to see that like graph trend upward, right? Of like, you want to see your progress and you want to see that confidence grow. So I think zooming out, looking back, and being like, okay, this is a process. I'm still learning, I'm still growing and evolving. It helps me maintain my confidence.
Yeah, and I think there's this stereotype where progress has to look just that up and to the right way on a graph. Like there is no, okay, up to the right, down to the left. Like, there's no ups and downs, and people don't think of it that way. But really, those downs is when the most growth happens. And when you need to have that rock and your confidence. And I think this is a really good question because you said, I think feedback, if it's not handled properly, can really mess with your head sometimes. And I think one of the biggest humps you have to get over, especially as a young professional when you're trying to find your way and get into this space, is that you cannot be afraid to ask questions. This is where I see so many people just plainly get stuck. They take feedback at face value without fully understanding it. And if you're unclear on what someone is saying or why they're saying it, seriously, just ask. Clarity is everything. Now, feedback is only going to help you get better if you only know how to understand it. If you don't understand it, it's just empty words because you cannot apply it to anything. Now, I get it. You're probably like, well, doesn't it take confidence to ask those questions? So if I don't have confidence to begin with, how am I going to ask questions? It does. But doing that also helps you build your confidence, because I will tell you, there is nothing worse than getting feedback or instructions, working your booty off on something only for it to completely miss a mark, because then you just have to go back and do it again. And you're wasting time when you could have just done it right the first time. That is a mega confidence hit. And if you aren't sure of something or you need more clarity, I am telling you, if you're listening to this and you are anywhere in the age of like college student to like 30 or 35, ask questions, always be curious, just keep asking questions. And the other thing I've also learned to go with that is that focus on what you can control. And that's a good life lesson too. Not
Truly is,
all
yes.
feedback is actionable, and that's okay. You don't have to fix everything all at once. I personally try to prioritize the parts that are realistic and impactful, and you let go of the rest. We're all human. You handle what you can handle, and, that's for now at least.
Yeah, I hope you guys found something to take away from this. And, please interact with us on LinkedIn. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your ideas. If you have those stories about navigating tough feedback and leadership, we want to hear them all. So come find us. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.